Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call the regularly scheduled meeting of the Lake Forest Planning Commission to order, and let the records reflect that there are two commissioners absent, Chairman Hamilton and Commissioner Brower. And with that, I'd like to ask Commissioner Fuentes to lead us in the pledge.
Please join me as we salute our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This brings us to the public comments section of our meeting, and this is the time when the public can address the Commission on any item that is not on the agenda tonight. If anyone here wants to do that, we'd request a speaker's card be filled out, and your time would be limited to 3 minutes, and in compliance with the Brown Act, we would not be able to take any action on that tonight. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to us in the public comments portion? All right. Seeing none, then we'll move on to a presentation item. Looks like we've got our consent calendar.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion to approve with a second. Any discussion? All right. All in favor? Let's go ahead and vote. Oh, I guess we need to be. So we have a technical malfunction, so we'll go with an audible vote. All in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. All right, that takes us to our public hearing items.
The public hearing item tonight is a plan sign program, and Jennifer Manser has a staff report.
Good evening, Vice Chairman and Commissioners. The item before you tonight is a plan sign program for the Campus South County Office Complex. The sign program will replace an existing plan sign program, 2001-07, at that site. This project is proposed in conjunction with an effort to rebrand the office complex at the corner of Town Center and Lake Forest as the campus at South County. The program proposes regulations and design for the wall signs and freestanding signs for the office complex. The wall sign section of the program regulates the location, size, and type of wall signs allowed on the 3 office buildings. Wall signage is allowed within the parapet area of the elevation, which is the area at the top of the building, and within the eyebrow area of the elevation, which is the area between the first floor and the second floor. The program allows 3 parapet signs and 3 eyebrow signs for a total of 6 signs per building. There are currently 4, although the report said 3, but there's 4 existing wall signs at the complex. These 4 wall signs are consistent with the sign program, with the exception that Fujitsu currently has both a parapet and an eyebrow sign that wouldn't be permitted by the new sign program. These signs are considered legal nonconforming or grandfathered signs, and they'd be allowed to remain as long as they aren't removed from the building. The sign program also allows 4 types of freestanding signs. 2 monument signs with the campus logo are proposed at the corners of Lake Forest and Town Center, and 2 monument signs that allow for tenant signage are proposed at the 2 driveway entrances on Town Center Drive. A directory sign is proposed in front of each of the 3 buildings, and a total of 4 directional signs are proposed at the site to direct vehicles on site. These freestanding signs are consistent in design and materials and will create a high quality and cohesive sign theme for the office complex. The city sign code allows deviations from the sign regulations with the planned sign program. The applicant is proposing deviations from the maximum sign area of the parapet signs, the height and sign area of the directory signs, and the height and sign area of the directional signs. Staff is supportive of these deviations because the deviations will not create a clutter of on-site signage, will assist vehicles and pedestrians to safely navigate the site, and will not negatively impact the aesthetics of the site from the surrounding area. Accordingly, staff is recommending approval of this planned sign program. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And the applicant is in the audience tonight, although he hasn't turned in a speaker form yet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Any questions for staff at this time? Okay, well, and let's see, do we have any requests to speak by the applicant? No? Okay. Maybe he's not that interested. All right, Commissioner, did you have a question you wanted to address with the applicant?
I just wondered if you had anything to add to what in addition to what we received in the staff report.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead and do that, and we'll make sure we get a speaker card for you.
Good evening. Just for the record, I just want to say Jennifer's been outstanding to work with on this project, and glad that the staff supports it.
Okay. Could we get you to state your full name and your city of residence just to start, please?
Sure. My name is Adam Burrows. I live in Rancho Santa Margarita,
Okay.
and I'm the applicant on behalf of JB3D and the building owners of CBRE.
Great. Yeah. Before you leave, please fill out a speaker card and make sure we get.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's bring it back up here and see if there's any discussion, comments. Anybody?
Well, I went by today, and it's looks like a beautiful complex. I think there's a little deviation from our regulations that adds, 6 inches? But the parking lot is so large that I think those directional signs would be beneficial to those maneuvering through the 3 different areas. So I don't have a problem with jumping a little over our regulation on that. And I would just wish the applicant good luck. It looks like there's fairly good tenants there now, and the parking lot wasn't totally full, but it looked like it should be good business. So good luck.
And looking over your plan, it looks like the signs and everything are scaled really well for the property, and it's a nice-looking signage package. I think it'll do a lot to help people find their way around it, because it is a large complex, and since it's on both sides of the street, why, it definitely needs good signage. So, all in all, I think it's very well done. Thank you.
Well, I think you're going to get a unanimous thumbs up on this one. I don't have any objections to the deviations from the sign code whatsoever. I too would concur with my fellow commissioners' comments. It's not obnoxious or obtrusive in any way, shape, or form, and I think I like the design, and I think this will be added. I am one who likes to have, especially in complexes like this, I like to have more directional signs. Maybe it's because I'm directionally challenged from time to time in that aspect. So this, to me, is what I'd like to see in a lot of complexes. So I think it's a good fit. So good job on putting it together. Thanks, Jennifer. Can I get a motion? Oh, I forgot to open the public hearing.
I was just going to close it.
So let's just go back and we pretend that I opened the public hearing on that, and we're good on that. So now you can close it and bring a motion. Thank you.
Close the public hearing. I think you did open it. And a motion to accept the resolution presented by staff.
I'll second the staff resolution motion.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Shall we try to vote electronically again, see if it's working or not? We'll give it one more try. All right. Well,
They broke it on Tuesday.
Yeah, they wore it out on... Huh? Look at there. All right. Your motion passes. Thank you. Okay.
Item number 3 is a workshop on potential amendments to the city's parking ordinance, and I will give you a brief staff report on that item. As you know, this is the third workshop to discuss these potential changes to residential parking standards. At the last workshop during February, the Planning Commission narrowed the discussion to staff's recommendations regarding the increased guest parking ratio for multifamily residential and developing standards for the use of tandem parking. The staff report in your packet provides the additional information requested by the Commission regarding multifamily standards, including additional demographic information and information regarding parking management plans. The report concludes with the following revised recommendations for multifamily guest parking. First, maintain the current 0.2 space per unit guest ratio for multifamily development. Allow consideration of a project-specific guest ratio on a case-by-case basis with Planning Commission approval, and require parking management plans for all new multifamily residential development. Additionally, due to a lack of relevant information regarding the effectiveness of tandem parking, staff is revising our recommendation to ask that no changes to the current regulations should be made at this time. Requests for the use of tandem parking would continue to be processed as an alternative development standard. Based on any direction provided by the Planning Commission tonight, staff will progress on to providing workshops on the other half of the parking regulations, which are the non-residential parking standards. After we have feedback regarding non-residential, we'll prepare a single ordinance amending the parking section for the Planning Commission's review. That concludes my report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Questions for staff at this time?
I was curious, you went back to the 0.2 number again from the 0.5. Can you give a little more information about what prompted you to do that? I'm not saying I disagree with it. I'm just curious the background of why you did that. I think the approach you're taking is the correct one. I was just curious why you went totally back to 0.2. Maybe you didn't move it to 0.3 or something like that.
Well, our thinking was that taking a step back and looking at the last couple of multifamily projects that have been approved, they've both had management plans that have really addressed the site-specific issues and the specific type of residential that's going in. And so we thought maybe the best course then is to just require a parking management plan that addresses parking every time we have multifamily, and it can provide a site-specific guest parking ratio. Given that, we didn't want to eliminate the guest parking ratio in favor of a case-by-case basis approach. We wanted to keep at least a baseline, and so 0.2 was what we decided. It's what we have on the books, and it's justified in that way. So we're not eliminating anything. We're adding to the flexibility and ability for projects to not have a one-size-fits-all approach.
So in that case, you could still require more than 0.2 if the project required it, but that would be a condition of the parking management plan?
That's correct.
So the parking management plan, in effect, is going to be the overriding item. The other thing is just in there as a guideline, more or less.
That was our thought as well, yes.
And I think that's a good idea. I think the parking management plan at least allows you to have some flexibility in dealing with particular situations, and it's probably easier on the developer.
They know where to start that way.
Yeah. And also allows us to, I think, be able to condition the thing a little bit better to guarantee, performance in the future, which is really tough if you don't. That's my comment.
Okay, and then the parking, I appreciate the perspective on this also. The parking management plan then, after the project's built, sold, and underway, then is a matter of a code enforcement matter then? Is that where it goes?
That's correct. In the two instances that we've dealt with recently, they're both recorded, especially the Avalon model. That is recorded on the property, and that way it runs with the land, and it's also it shows up on a title report. So if that property changes hands, it's something that everyone's going to be aware of.
Okay. And do we have any statistical data as to how that's working on any project at all in terms of the enforcement aspects?
We don't have any parking management plans currently in place. We have the two most recent ones, but what the Avalon model showed is that they've used this, they're a nationwide company.
Right.
And they have, as I mentioned in the staff report, their own model for developing how much parking they think they need. And it's a very interesting model. It has certain factors in there, like are you in a center city? Are you in a place that has transit? And so those things, coupled with their parking management plan that they have experience with nationwide, has been what they found successful.
Okay, but as far as you know, then from other cities that have similar type of access to public transportation as Lake Forest does and those kind of things, do we have any data that's been collected in an enforcement capacity that we could look at where they may or may not be experiencing problems?
We don't. Code enforcement could reach out if necessary to other jurisdictions, if that's something you'd like to see.
Okay, thank you.
It seems like, if I remember in the staff report, they indicated that Irvine has quite a few parking management plans in place. Is there any way we could talk to the people at Irvine and see what their experience has been in terms of enforcement of parking management, if that's been an issue for them?
We could certainly reach out and talk with their code enforcement. We have taken tours of the Irvine Company projects. We met with Irvine community builders, Irvine apartment builders. We've toured projects. We know they continue to use this, and that over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, they've literally built thousands of units. So anecdotally, Irvine is comfortable with the parking management approach, and the Irvine Company, as the owner of the apartments, continues to use this as their mechanism to enforce the parking.
Well, I think it's a good idea. It'd be interesting because Irvine probably has enough time and experience with it. They could give us some interesting statistical data, just as kind of a baseline. They're probably the best example we have.
Yeah, I think it would be advisable if we can collect any data from them, just to have that to discuss. I'm sure they have a very proactive enforcement group over there, and if there are any, if there were any problems and they showed us how that was resolved quickly, I'm not anticipating that we're going to end up with a large number of problems putting into properly structured parking management plans, because that does put the onus back on the owner, right? And if there's some, we need to make sure that there's a sufficient motivation that if there is a problem, that we have whatever rights and remedies that are necessary. I don't want to be overbearing, but whatever is necessary to get compliance is where we need to be sure we're at.
Well, I think, too, having it in the condition and running with the land, make sure that any property management company they hire can't claim ignorance about enforcing the parking management plan, which I'm sure could be a problem.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess it's appropriate to welcome the chairman. But should we open a public comment section on this now? Okay. Well, let's go ahead and open the public comment section. And if there's anyone that we do have a speaker, okay, well, we'll wait till the chairman gets here, and I'll turn the gavel back over to him, and he can introduce the speaker.
I apologize for being late. I didn't think I'd make it.
I think you have to pledge by yourself.
All right. Anyone from the public wishes to speak on an agenda item before us? Not before us. We have a speaker card.
Yes.
All right, we're on item number 3.
Steve Carlson.
My name is Steve Carlson. I'm a resident of Lake Forest. Just kind of an observation on the discussion of parking management. The owner of the property, it seems to me, is enforcing parking to protect himself, and failing that, he forces vehicles off his property, and that's right in line with what he has to go by. So that creates an additional problem for the people that live nearby. I wanted to answer a question that came up at one of the previous workshops, and that had to do with what constitutes a guest. A lot of this discussion is about guest parking. Well, what's a guest? My condo development went through a process of writing rules and regs on parking, and we lifted a lot of our basic information right off of websites from patrol services who are in the business of doing this. And pretty much across the board, all the different patrol services defined a guest as anyone parking overnight 10 times in 90 days. And of course, they do this all with computers. They drive around, and they can knock out a pretty good size guest parking configuration in 15 or 20 minutes. It works slick. They do all the enforcement for us now. We did it ourselves with their procedures, and then we finally just hired them to do it. But I did want to answer that question on what constitutes a guest. And of course, it's subjective, but 10 and 90 seems to work.
Is there anyone that wishes to address the commission on this item? All right, seeing none, I guess we'll bring it back to the commission for any additional questions or comment, or now go for questions. Staff.
I want to follow up on Mr. Carlton's comment as to what is the definition of a guest, and I think that's a very valid point, and that would have to be considered if we're going to move forward with the idea of the development, execution, and enforcement, ultimately enforcement of parking management plans. I'm aware of people who have a tendency to park on the street for more than 72 hours on a regular basis. And I'm sure that that's common in many neighborhoods around. If that particular individual is parking in front of their own residence, it probably isn't a big deal, but if they're using their vehicle parking in front of other people's residence, that could be considered to me offensive, right? And not that, we're talking about how do we make the best out of future developments by learning what we've already got. And so I agree here that we should make sure that we're defining the term guest or putting in some provisions here or some fail-safes, I guess, to make sure that the term guest is adequately identified in any future projects so that we're not incurring what Mr. Carlton just expressed to us.
Any questions to staff? All right, so I guess we're to commissioner comments.
I'm in agreement with the staff recommendation to move forward with the parking management plans, and I think offers some flexibility there. I also agree with the definition of a guest, because that could be a lot of different things, I guess, to different people. Is that something that we would look at, I suppose, would we come up with some kind of a standard definition for a guest in terms of our guidance to developers when they come to us with a parking management plan, or is that something we can legally do?
We can make that a requirement if I've bullet pointed a few potential requirements for parking management plans, we can add, you have to have a definition of guest, because we've already said that they need to give us guest parking policies. That can include a definition of what is a guest and how those policies are enforced.
As I can see from a developer standpoint, that's a very difficult thing to deal with. It also affects how much parking you have. It affects how people live there. But I think that we're on the right track here. The issue with the tandem parking, I can't even come to any kind of a conclusion on tandem parking. We just don't know anything about it. So I think you're on the right track with that. I think in general I would support the direction that you're taking with the parking management. I would pretty much support things the way they're going.
Well, I think there's, and again, taking the information from Mr. Carlton, is sufficient. There's sufficient data by which I think a good definition of guest can be arrived at. I mean, his association has hired a company that manages these kind of things. So I think there's information that's out there. We just need to make sure we collect it and come into some agreed upon terms as to how we want to define it within our city and that kind of a thing. But we just don't want to let this just be a vague term, I think. I think we want to be able to put not necessarily a set in concrete verbiage in it, have a little bit of latitude in there, but I think we need to know what that should encompass. Let's see if we can find a high point and work within the middle.
So if anyone else wants to, from the commission, comment, but I would just say, I think we have staff wants us to comment on three things. So single family, multifamily, and tandem.
So I was under the impression that single family was working well the way we have it, which is maybe why we haven't commented on that. I think, Commissioner Ludden mentioned that the point 2 would be then something very simple for the developer to base his parking. Well, my concern is the developer does it and then he leaves, and then it's the residents and the neighbors that are left with what was easy for the developer, which can become very difficult for the rest of us. So I just am not quite sure, and maybe this should have been a question for staff, if the existing code requirement for guest parking in multifamily is something we're willing to keep, why didn't it work for some of the problem areas in our city? And if there are problem areas in our city with the current code, maybe we should bump that up just a little. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'd just be a little interested to see and hear where the rest of you what you might think about bumping it up just a bit. I hate to use numbers, I get in trouble. So bump it up is good.
No, I just, I think I'd like to answer at least the single family, or direct my comments toward the single family and the multifamily at Mission Viejo. I think Mission Viejo had just a little bit higher, and I think that's kind of your first bullet point on the single family, was to kind of increase the parking. I don't know how exactly it went with Mission Viejo, but I think Mission Viejo had a little bit higher on the multi-family. So I'm thinking in the single family. I think that's very close. I'm just saying probably just a little bit more requirements. It's like Mission Viejo. I don't know exactly how that jives. But I think the multifamily, I think again, Mission Viejo was a very similarly developed community. Correct me if I'm wrong. Were they at 0.35? Is that what they were at on the multifamily guest ratio? Or was it 0.3? I can't remember.
The resident parking, are you talking resident or guest from multifamily?
For guest.
For guest multifamily, Mission Viejo is at 0.33.
0.33 in the middle. So that's kind of what I was thinking is 0.33. Mission Viejo standard, which is 0.33. So that would be my humble opinion, and I agree with the elimination of the dual standards. So I guess that helps address your bump up a little.
That's a bump. Up.
A little.
Little.
If I remember correctly, the example you showed, it was, I can't even remember, 5% more parking spaces for the project, something like that. If you looked at the Mission Viejo scenario and compared it to that example.
For a 100-unit project, that would be 33 guest parking stalls rather than 20 that we'd get now.
So 13%. In Tandem, I'm a fan of Tandem, having owned Tandem, and I don't know what the others, I don't think there's a consensus on that, but that's just my opinion.
But can I just follow up on Tandem? But if we don't determine Tandem, may we look at Tandem on a case-by-case basis?
Absolutely. The current code says Tandem is considered as an alternative development standard. The developer makes the case as to why it's preferred in this particular situation over side-by-side parking. So our recommendation in the current staff report is for Tandem Parking to keep it as an alternative development standard at this time, let the project in Lake Forest using Tandem Parking build out, and we'll come back once we have something here and we have some something measurable to look at as to the success of Tandem.
And just one other comment, I'm not expecting or would propose an equal, you know, if there was only 2 spots in a garage and they were both Tandem, I don't know it would qualify as 2. I think there should be some discount for that, but I still think it's not a full 50% discount to only count as 1 space if there were 2 spots, one of them being that Tandem spot. Anyway, any other comments?
I'm not a big fan of Tandem. I'm waiting to see how this project with Brookfield works out, and I think we need to give it a couple of years of study before there's going to be any real definition as to how that's going to come out. Because I think statistically speaking, more people use the second Tandem space for storage than they do, and that does create an additional parking problems. And maybe this location won't create it because we have a fair amount of street availability, and we have a mix. It's not all Tandem. There are some Tandem mixed in with side-by-side, so it'll be an interesting study. But I'm personally of the belief that there should be some discounting of the spaces when it comes to Tandem, just to be sure that we're okay. But again, to set something in stone here and say this has to be the case, I think is maybe a little too aggressive. I think we need to look at these things on a per project basis. I would be a little more comfortable with coming up from the 0.2 though, and looking at something maybe the 0.33 would be, you know, I'm okay with that. I was thinking in my own mind the 0.35. We'd had some discussion the last time. There was a number that was 0.4 that seemed to be kind of resonating back and forth. I don't know that that's any better than anything else. I'm just not real overly comfortable at .2. I think we're underparked at that ratio. But then again, if we're going to take it on a per-project basis, we need to make sure that we're really, getting in there. Obviously, if we're at a .33 or a .35 and a project comes in and we can say, hey, .2 would probably work, that could be approved. We don't have to stick a developer in that box under the same rules that we're talking about, right? I mean, we have flexibility. That's it.
Well, before the commission provides direction, I think we have kind of two different ideas on the floor. We're hearing increase to .33, and others, we're also hearing use the parking management plan on a case-by-case basis. So I'm not sure where we're going yet.
Well, I think we were looking at .33 and the management as opposed to .2 and the management.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you had in mind as well?
Yeah, maybe I should be a little bit better in my
If you accept the
thoughts.
pledge, you'd be better off.
I think allowing an applicant flexibility and having the .2 with a management plan, or having the .33, and they can then choose which development. And so let me clarify again my comments. So they would have the option to either go either route and go with the .2 with some kind of management plan, or they could do .33, or I'm just one of 5 here, so that's just my humble. They could go for, hey, you don't want to do the management plan, well, just give us a little bit more, a slight increase in parking.
Okay, so you're inclined to think, lay that out for a developer to choose between option 1 and option 2. Okay.
Well, what is Irvine? Their point? And I'm not comparing us to Irvine in any way, shape, or form.
Irvine's guest ratio is .25.
With the management plan.
I'm not positive whether the parking management plan is required by code or if it's just something Irvine apartment communities uses.
Well, I'm not in favor of letting them off the hook without doing a parking management plan, because I still think part of the issue is, making sure there's sufficient guest parking, but I think there's still the issue of the ability to do code enforcement down the road. If you don't have the parking management plan in place, having it running with the land, you have no way of enforcement once you've approved it. That's why I'm really not particularly in favor of letting developers off the hook from that. I've seen enough developments in my travels where the property managers are not enforcing the parking or doing anything else, and you got all types of crazy things going on. The neighbors around it just hate it. So, and you have no place to go. You can't enforce it. You can't do anything. So, whatever the number is, whether it's between .2 to .33 or 3.5, I'm not super worried about that number as much as I am that the parking management plan is in place and that we use the minimum number as sort of an incentive to get people to do a better job on the parking management plan. That's kind of where I am on it.
Okay, let me, maybe this is a question for staff. If we go with the parking management idea and we leave everything in place that it is at .2, and it turns out that the parking management plan at the .2 ratio is not working, how does that get addressed? I mean, obviously the city's not involved at that point. That is an issue between the owner and the enforcement of the city. I mean, we're not bringing it back to change any of their development. But how would that be addressed, or has that even been considered?
Do you mean if we were finding that their parking management plan wasn't managing parking well enough?
Yeah, if they came in and they developed their project based on a .2 with a parking management plan, and they found out that they were having unexpected results in the parking management plan at .2, and that in fact they should have built out at, say, .3.
Right. While you're correct, we couldn't make them add guest parking
Right.
after the entitlements are in place, we have had experiences where we've had overflow parking, and through the net team, code enforcement, Public Works, we've worked with different apartment communities to bring their parking back on site and have them make changes internally that help their overflow parking situations. Sometimes that's been a permit parking program in the adjacent neighborhoods. Sometimes we've been able to address it just through cooperation. I wouldn't think we'd have anything other than that, unless there was something in the parking management plan that, addressed future
Okay.
situations.
So if the parking management plan has a set of rules and regulations, it must also have a set of enforcement capacity. And so then it just becomes one that until owners get it brought into compliance, they just keep getting whatever it is, the compliance mechanism keeps getting exercised. Is that right? Okay.
Another question. So, do you have any idea what the cost of a parking management plan would be for a developer coming in? Does that potentially raise the rent of an apartment? Does it add a $5,000 fee to each condo? I think of Irvine, and there are people that love Irvine, but it is the Irvine company, and so they can tell everybody what they want done. Whereas here, we're looking for that businessman to come and to develop an apartment building, and I would hate to be I would want to be well parked, but I wouldn't want to incur an ongoing cost to a businessman or a woman who comes to our town and wants to build apartments and wants to have them affordable for my children to live in or your children to live in. So I'm just curious, does it really bump it up, the cost? It's a big word.
I'll take a stab. That's certainly a good question. What we find, kind of the difference if we look at apartment development in the city over the last 40 years, that, 40 years ago, we saw smaller apartment complexes, but the economies of scale, we have large apartment complexes, even dating from the 70s, mid-80s. We've got, typically 200 to 300 units in a complex. And what we find is they have on-site management. That is the norm. Larger apartment complexes with on-site management. And this is just one more tool that the on-site management company is going to use. I don't see it as adding additional costs. What we find are on-site managers to ensure that the facilities are well-run and well-maintained, and leasing offices on site and amenities there. So there is a management company presence at the sites now, and they would be in charge of implementing and monitoring the parking management plan.
And that's for apartments.
Yes.
So let's move to condos, because the same standard would apply to condos, correct? So now, does that bump the cost of the condo that I want to buy, because the developer has to, instill this parking management plan, and then for perpetuity, I would have to have that management or that patrol service to come in, and I think I was speaking to Mr. Carlton last night, and they pay $900 a month to have their patrol service manage how many condos? 321. So then you put a developer comes in and they want to put in 40 units. Well, a 40-unit complex probably can't afford, and it's going to be probably not 900, but it's going to be like 500, and maybe that 40-unit complex can't afford that kind of expenditure for that kind of parking management plan. So I'm just curious how we pay for it.
Well, in the case of, yes, the cost would be passed on. To have an effective parking management plan, it's going to have to be enforced, whether you use a patrol company, whether you use your on-site management. The parking management plan is going to be as good as its enforcement. And someone will have to inspect garages. Someone will have to look for the vehicles that are parked overnight. There is a cost. We haven't looked at exactly what the cost is, but to manage that situation and to, maintain your land, there is a cost to keep the project up.
Thank you.
Well, I think, too, that you end up with a cost one way or the other, because if you're not enforcing, then you have a harder time. If the people around there, if the residents around there perceive that they're not getting the value for what they're paying in their rent, then they pack up and they go somewhere else. And you have a harder time getting quality tenants. And I think that the parking enforcement is just part of the quality of life that you have in a multi-family development. And I think most of them expect that, if somebody's parked in their parking stall that doesn't belong there, that somebody's going to come along and tow them away. And they also probably expect to pay for that. I mean, it's part of the price you pay for living in a multi-situation is that you can't always trust everybody to be honest. It just doesn't always happen. So I think there's a cost either way, and I think you can either overpark it in an effort to try and get rid of that, but I don't know that that necessarily fixes it. I noticed in your report you mentioned the fact that sometimes what that does is it causes people not to get rid of excess vehicles and other things, and that's where you get more problems with people parking stuff there for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, and it becomes a free, cheap parking place. So I don't know that you can totally get away with the cost of enforcement. I don't care what you do. It's a fact of life, and you have to live with it.
So, well, I was just going to say that I agree with a lot of Commissioner Ludden's comments. I think most of us would say that, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think most of us would say, the best practice would be to have somebody on site proactively enforcing a parking management plan. And however, I think the situation is one that, what if they're not going to do that? And so I think staff is going to utilize, the levers that they have the ability to impact the parking by code enforcement, by, all those things. And so I guess where I'm going with this is that forcing someone to do that is almost like then taking away that free market pull that the residents, hey, you know what? Someone's in my parking spot every night. So while I think it's a good idea to have that parking plan, that parking management plan, forcing them to do it kind of takes away that free market incentive for them to do it. And like you said, they're going to end up getting bit by having lower quality tenants and issues and people complaining and calling the city. Obviously don't want to increase the time the city to code enforce, but I think even if we were to require that parking management plan, we're still going to always fall into that situation where there's going to be some are oddballs that just don't do a good job doing it. So I think it's always going to default to code enforcement with issues, and so that's kind of why I think maybe we could give them two options and increase the parking a little bit, give them a little freedom, let them experience the pain of that of those people who are overparked and all the complaints. It's kind of like taking away the consequence for for them.
Well, I understand where you're going. I don't totally disagree with it, but on the other hand, the thing you don't want is an apartment complex that's not being maintained. And the reason they're not maintained is because either they don't keep up with the rent, or they don't keep up with the property, or they have really dissatisfied tenants because they're not taking care of them. I mean, if you got a 40-unit complex, you can send the rental manager out to check and see who's parked in the wrong spot. Or you can have a phone number that they call and leave a message, this guy's been in my parking spot for 3 days, please get rid of him. I mean, I don't think it's impossible, even in a small complex, for the owner not to do code enforcement. I just think that it depends on the project. All we're telling them is you need to have a parking plan. You need to tell us how you're going to manage it going forward, and you're going to agree to do certain things to make sure the place doesn't become a blight on the city. I don't think that's unreasonable. And, we're not telling them that they have to have this really rigid standard parking plan that works for a 250-unit complex if you're running 20 units. But I think, if you're running a 4-unit, quadplex, maybe you don't need it at all. But on the other hand, if it's the problem spilling out into other parts of the city beyond that private property, you created a burden for the rest of the city. And I think at that point, unfortunately, society doesn't work without rules. And I don't think that's going to change. So, I agree with you. I don't like to impose things on owners that aren't realistic. But on the other hand, rules need to be there in order to keep order. I guess maybe that's the best way to put it. So, that's why I'm a little reluctant to back too far out of that, because I think that if it doesn't do anything else, it forces the owner to look at how he's going to deal with the problem going forward, and you're dealing with it before he builds the project. So he has to think about it. He's not just off building the project to figure out, I can build 40 units, it's going to cost me this much, let's say I've got to collect this much in rent, I'm going to pay the mortgage plus my expenses. And it forces them to think a little bit beyond that point, to how are they going to manage it, and how's it going to be a functioning part of the city going forward. And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, we're living in a society that have an increasing number of vehicles per housing unit. And that's one of the things that we didn't have when a lot of our neighborhoods were built. There's a neighborhood right in here in Lake Forest. There's another one over in Mission Viejo. There are two fairly good examples of, after the fact, having to deal with excess parking. One is the Aliso Villas 1 and 2 over in Mission Viejo. Each of those units is built with a one-car garage, and there's a one-car assigned parking space. But if you were to drive over there, starting at maybe around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or if you're there 6 o'clock at night, you will find that they've gone and they've striped off the street, so they've made in parking stalls now. Otherwise, people were crammed in there like sardines. But the overflow goes to the residences across Tribuco into, whatever that tract is. Those people's streets are being parked by that excess overflow because the city has said you can't park along Tribuco there, which I think was great in some aspects. So it does shift it. The other one is right here in Lake Forest, Grandview Crest, at 341 units. A lot of extra parking. They decided to go into a plan where they inspect garages once a month. And if you've got a garage full of stuff, you get a notification that you need to clear it out and park your vehicles in there, because they have a limited number of parking spaces on there. And you can still park out on Aliso Park there. You can get out there and park. But they did something after the fact. We're talking about doing something proactively. And I think we need to take that on. I'm not in favor of option 1 or option 2. I think we need to take a position, decide what that is, and go with it, and then work with that. And I'm more in favor of the planned parking management here, as staff has put out there.
Well, I had one more thought, and that is that as we approve more and more neighborhoods where the lot size gets smaller and smaller, and you're cramming more houses in less space, the problem with that overflow from multifamily back into the single family now gets a whole lot worse. It's a much more difficult problem because there's no place left to go. Because you barely have enough parking for the single family people, let alone any overflow from anything that's adjacent to it. And I think because of the cost of property, that probably forces us to, spend a lot more effort on making sure that this parking problem doesn't get out of hand at the building and design stage, so that they don't run into that mess later on where you really don't have any good options to fix it. I mean, once it's there, it's too late. I mean, then you've got no place to go.
I'll just say one final thing from my vantage point. Everyone else can continue, but I think I'll be done after this one, is that I think we all want to be proactive up front. You know, one other thing that's happened recently off of Ridge Route toward the 5 is that you know, things got out of hand, went into adjoining neighborhoods, and so they started doing permitted parking. And now, really, I mean, they're really feeling the heat inside that complex, both the management and the tenants. So that's just one other thing that's at the disposal of the city. So, any other comments? I'm sure that was clear as mud now, how we should proceed. Anything else on this item staff wants to mention?
No, but we would, we are looking for some direction. So we've heard many things, and that would be helpful for us. That's what we need to get is.
So you want a consensus of what we'd like?
Right. But, you know, this is the commission will be a recommending body to the city council. So we just want a consensus of where you want to go. And Cheryl, maybe you could just identify those items in particular. We could take it one by one. Sure. And then move on.
So our recommendation, so we believe we've reached consensus already on the multifamily standard to eliminate the guest parking, I'm sorry, the dual standard, meaning the either square foot or bedroom count, and we believe we reached consensus on that one in February. We also think that we reached consensus on no change to single-family standards in February. So what that leaves is the multifamily standards, which you guys have discussed at length. Our prior recommendation was increased from 0.2 to 0.5. Our new recommendation is to use a parking management plan and then have a baseline of 0.2. And then the second item is tandem parking. Our prior recommendation was to develop standards on that. Our new recommendation is no change. So the two things we're looking at, after I've summarized, multifamily standards for guests and tandem parking.
So I'm just wondering if I get this. I get the opinion that we want to have one, not option A and B. Would 0.25 with the parking management plan be of interest to anybody?
I'd agree to the 0.25 number with the required parking management plan.
I'm okay with that, too.
I guess I'd be all right, but I still think having another option. But I think
Well,
it
don't
sounds
they
like there's
really have
consensus.
another option? Because if they came to us and said we want to do 0.35, 33, whatever you're thinking, and then we could say you don't have to have, or your parking management plan is very minimal. I mean, wouldn't that be what this body is here to do, is to, on a case-by-case basis, maybe somebody that is offering 0.5 only needs just a little Band-Aid for a parking management plan?
I would agree, not having a crystal ball, but I would agree that different parking management plans would take different forms, and your examples, I think, are good ones.
So I guess we're on to tandem.
Well, no. Don't go so quick. Okay. I'd like to see whatever we come up with to have some definition of the term guest. All right. Now you can move on to tandem.
Any other comments on multifamily? All right, I'll start off with tandem in that I might not have a consensus, but I'm willing to wait, as maybe Commissioner or Vice Chair Verplank mentioned. So I could cave a little on that one. But I think eventually I'd like to see us get a standard and not just say we'll evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. So I'll be patient.
Yeah, it's well known. I didn't like that aspect of the Brookfield project, but I'm willing to take a look and see how it comes out. My concerns are with those is if we have those infill projects and they're adjacent to other single-family residences, that really could create some problems. But that's going to be in the future. We don't have anything before us, so we just want to look at that. Hopefully, we'll keep really good data and evaluate that, because we can always come back and get into our code and make them changes to that as time would tell and the need would be.
I think my feeling on the tandem issue is that we don't have enough information. We really don't know enough to make an informed decision about that yet, and I think we need to look at projects that they're proposing tandem parking in detail to see how that project fits with the area around it, to see how the project is laid out, to see what the traffic flow is based on that around the complex, and what type of other problems it creates in terms of people maneuvering vehicles and things like that. I think we just don't have enough experience to come up with any kind of a defined policy at this point.
Any other comments on?
Well, I would say that the consensus is then that we're going to go with your recommendation on tandem.
Thank you. We can take that as a consensus. I think that was very clear. Thank you very much.
All right, I guess that ends
So from
discussion item.
Yeah, well, from here then, the next thing is you'll come back with what we're going to go ahead and recommend to the City Council. Is that it?
Well, as Cheryl mentioned earlier, there's still other aspects of the parking code we're working on. We separated residential and non-residential. We need to put them all back together. Okay. And we're also bringing to the Planning Commission some recommendations from the council from Tuesday night on changing some of the standards in our shared parking. So there's parking. So hopefully we can get them all, instead of a little piecemeal code amendments, put them all together and have that for you to send on to the council.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds good. That leads us to director comments, if I'm looking at the agenda correctly.
That you are. I have no comments this evening other than to wish everyone a happy Memorial Weekend, and we'll see you in June. June 12th is our next meeting.
City Attorney comments.
I have no comments.
Bring it back to the Planning Commission for.
Going to start on the left. Is that it? Okay. Well, I'm as far left as you get tonight. It'll be 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I believe, that the city and the Chamber of Commerce did the joint business workshop here at the city, and I thought it was a very successful event. I attended for a little over half of it. I had to leave. I had an appointment, but I thought it was really well done. I've attended several of those, and that one was by far the better of the ones that I had attended. So it's just a comment, and I too would like to wish everybody a very pleasant and happy Memorial Day.
I'd like to commend the staff on the excellent job they did on the reports tonight, and your help in working through some of these issues. Your information really is helpful, and your willingness to bring stuff back to us really does help. Commend the developer on his sign program. I thought that was really well done, and I'm glad we could all approve it. Also very grateful to my fellow commissioners that we're able to work so well together, and I really appreciate the diversity of ideas that we get, and I think we come up with much better solutions because of that. And again, I'll wish everybody a happy Memorial Day too.
Well, I agree with everything Tom just said, and I would only add that I went last night to the traffic committee, what do they call them? Yeah. And very well done by staff. Lots of staff was there to facilitate. I went to the one at Lake 2, which is my home area, and the staff took copious notes, and they are compiling them now, and I think we're probably going to hear more about this, but very well done, a great presentation, and just a lot of staff there to answer. I think everybody that was there, all 8 or 9 of them, were very pleased.
I'd agree with Ludden, except with the caveat. No, I'm kidding. No, I think I really enjoy the Planning Commission a lot here. When I first came on board, that situation I felt was existent most of the time, but I think here it's definitely the vast majority of the time. So I think I really appreciate everyone's opinions, and I think we're a respectful bunch, and we work well together. So same here. And happy Memorial Day to everyone. I think it's a time of that we can reflect and really consider the sacrifices people have made for us. And you know, we are the land of the free and the brave. And it didn't come at a free price. It came at a cost. And we're all very lucky. With that, we're adjourned.